I really greatly value the beginnings of sentences because, and although you won't be able to apply this thought to this video because it's unscripted, I attempt to vary the beginnings of my sentences and scripts and any other form of writing that I do, because it maintains interest and it also more vividly illustrates a point, rather than just starting out a sentence with words like the and this and it and cousins of words like that. And you can really tell if a writer is a good writer or a bad writer by how they approach this. Now, it won't necessarily be a conscious thought on the mind of any writer, but conscious or not, it's definitely an element that is undeniably present among good writers. And let's apply this to books. You can tell if a book is good. Some people have different metrics. They say, oh, in the first chapter, oh, in the first 50 pages. I think you can tell if a book is going to be good in the first page, because if the writing is good and they approach the beginnings of sentences with respect, then the book is likely worth reading. And the inverse is also true. So that's one way to tell if the first page is good, is by the varied sentence structure and beginnings of sentences. I actually, one exception to this rule that I have is a book called The Circle. And I think why is an exception is because a friend lent it to me and said that I should read the book. Now, I read the first page, of course, and I did not think it was very good. The book, by the way, is called The Circle by Dave Eggers. And it was not good. The book is about 300 pages long, and I read 200 pages and then put it down. I don't know why I wasted so much of my time on a book that was both not good and didn't interest me. And I think that's kind of funny, but in usual cases, you don't need very long at all to know if a book or any other medium, any other piece of that medium is going to be worth your time. And the same applies to video games. You can tell in the first couple hours, even if that, not even necessarily a couple hours, you can tell if a game is going to be good. And let's say, I'm sure some people will give examples of games that started off poorly but picked up afterwards. And it's like, oh, this is a great game. But if it does pick up afterwards, then is it really an actually good game if its foundation is fraught with boredom or flaws or whatever else might be present with your initial impression? I experienced this with The Witcher 2. And it's one of the reasons why I put it down so quickly. I returned to it afterwards multiple times because, I think to myself, I tried it out. It wasn't good. Let me give it a second shot. And I think I ended up giving it 3 tries. But I put it down in the first couple of hours of the game because it had an overly long and really just an intellectually insulting tutorial. It didn't I don't think it respected the player at all. It had probably 6 or 7 different art styles between the core game and the cutscenes and everything else. And it was just a casserole of half-baked game mechanics that didn't work well together, mechanics and systems. The combat was clunky. The item system and the way you use the potions and all that stuff were overly complex unnecessarily and confusing and cumbersome, and it interrupted playing of the game. I know you're supposed to predict how battle is going to go before you get into any sort of combat and then apply anything to your weapons or yourself that you need to, but it just doesn't work very smoothly or intuitively. And it felt like a lot of these and with the conversations as well, it felt like the conversation choices that, it's The Witcher is praised as one of these games is like, oh, it's not like Mass Effect where you're a good guy or you're a bad guy, it's kind of all gray area. But the conversation choices really felt grafted onto the final product rather than smoothly implemented into it. And et cetera, et cetera. I could go on and on about The Witcher 2. I really, I don't like it so much. But you can compare that to the beginning of Mass Effect, and maybe it's not a fair comparison, a fair analogy, but I'm going to do it anyway because I think I have a fair bit of knowledge about Mass Effect. So anyway, the game opens and it's you could almost qualify it as an in media res, perhaps, where you're Commander Shepard and you're talking to the pilot, you're in some kind of spaceship, and then you go into another room and the captain of the ship tells you that the mission you're going on is because some weird race of machines, but you don't really know that yet. You just know it's something is attacking the colonies there. And it's great because right away we know, one, aliens are living and working in harmony, right? Two, there is intra-racial conflict because, spoiler alert, two Turians kill each other. It's not really a spoiler. It happens in the first 10 minutes of the game. And you know what the enemy is because you're presented with something big and scary. And so kind of know what you're going to be going after throughout the game. You know what all of the characters are like. And, granted, Mass Effect combat isn't really that spectacular, but it has a great opening and it envelops you into the world. And that's one of the main appeals of Mass Effect is its world building and how it connects to you, how it taps you into that. And so that's why I think it's a great opening. So, and of course, I'd be remiss if I spent all this time talking about the openings of games and I didn't mention anything that happens in between the beginning and the end. Something, of course, that's too long, that's drawn out or it has a bad ending can retroactively degrade your opinion of the game, even if it had a good opening, that you would have had if it was shorter, for example. And the reason why I've been talking about the beginnings of sentences and the openings of games so much is because you might think, because, the first impression is what it's all about. And while that is true, I think it's more important than the end, because if you start a game and it has a great opening and you're playing throughout the game, you're enjoying the journey the entire time, kind of untainted, so to speak. But if it has a bad ending, you're like, oh, come on, why'd it have to be soiled like that at the end? But before you got to the ending, you enjoyed that journey and hopefully learned something about yourself or the world. And of course, that's what most games should be doing. But if it has a great ending and a bad opening, subconsciously that's kind of festering in your mind, the bad introductory sequence of the game, the first hour or so, whatever. And that's disallowing you to really learn something from the game. And it's the overcoming the frictional resistance to forgetting about a bad beginning is much greater than reflecting on your experience of a game that had a great opening and great middle, but a bad ending, because, it is more conducive to learning something about yourself or the world. And, as they say, it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. But you can't front load that forgiveness at the beginning of the game and ask the player to forgive a bad introductory experience to carry on with the game, because the player will not forget that. And I think it's very valuable to treat beginnings as if it were the most important part of the game. Some games you find meaning throughout the middle, but you won't get to the middle without going through the beginning. So that's why I think that you can tell if a game is going to be bad if the beginning is bad. And the same is with authors and sentences.